Identify yourself, please.
I'm Rob Heverly. I'm an associate professor at Albany Law School. I too am going to not follow my submitted testimony directly in the hopes that it can be a little bit shorter. I know with a law professor that's not necessarily guaranteed, but I'll do my best. Chairman Brennan, Chairman Schimminger, members of the committees, I appreciate...
I'm sorry, just hold on one second. We have a written statement from Robert Heverly from...
That's me.
I'm sorry, I must have misheard your name. Okay, go ahead.
I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. I have three themes that I want to talk about. I haven't heard about them as much as I would have liked throughout the day, and it actually seems like we might be going in the other direction. The themes are convergence, infrastructure, and pace of change. When talking about convergence, I'm thinking about that we should not be discussing video competition or phone competition or broadband competition, but we need to discuss competition in facilities, in infrastructure. By discussing video competition, we're missing the power of incumbents who hold the wire to shape the consumer experience and even the ability to innovate. We're even talking about ensuring there's no competition. Here's a little bit of money, you go somewhere where no one is and we'll make sure no one else comes in. We have to abandon this and focus instead on infrastructure. That allows other people to innovate on top of it, all of this over-the-top or on-the-top technology that we're talking about. How can we get competition in infrastructure? Well, the first thing to do is to modernize franchise procedures and regulations. They don't make much sense. As discussed in the PSC report, Verizon can run a wire, upgrade its facilities, and so long as it doesn't offer video over that same wire, it doesn't need a franchise. And as soon as it decides to run video over that same wire, it needs to obtain a franchise. That's ridiculous. It's not how it should work. What goes over the wire shouldn't matter. What are they doing? They're using public streets. They're using public rights-of-way. That should be the test for what's necessary for a franchise. And honestly, it should be whether there's capacity. And other than that, there shouldn't be a lot of negotiation about what goes back and forth over the wire. What else can we do for infrastructure competition? Google Fiber. PSC doesn't mention Google, but yet in every city that Google Fiber has gone in, rates and availability of better service has increased from incumbent competitors. So Google Fiber goes in, everybody realizes they need to step up their game. When they're a monopoly, there's no game to step up. They're the only game in place. What's the other thing we can do? Municipal Wi-Fi service, where municipalities roll out the facilities themselves, operate them, and provide service either at a low cost or at a discount to people within the municipality. Again, this puts pressure on the incumbents to step up their game. My third point is the pace of change. All this is changing and really, really quickly. We're not talking about the same things right now that we were talking about 10 years ago. We shouldn't be legislating technologies or market offerings. We shouldn't be discussing triple plays or, now I read today, quad plays. That's not where we should be focusing our attention. We should be focusing our attention on trying to get competition. And the internet has shown us that we can really get competition across the whole field so long as we have a base. And the base here is the infrastructure. And we need to spend some time trying to figure out how to get competition in the infrastructure layer. When I teach internet law, I begin by telling my students that sometimes the internet matters to a legal analysis and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a red herring. It leads us astray. It's new and it's shiny, it's different, and we think it's all special. When we look more closely, it's not. All technology can do this. We're attracted to it. We pay attention to it. But we need to be wary of this tendency to focus on a particular technology as though it will last forever or though it's changed everything. In contrast, sometimes we're so bound to our conceptions of law and regulation or markets and technologies that we can fail to see when the categories we have created no longer make sense. My example in my testimony is the Federal Communications Commission. They still have bureaus based around the type of service that's being offered when the competitors all offer all types of services. The case here is we should seize the opportunity to encourage competition, especially at the infrastructure level, if we're serious, in services that allow others to innovate on top of that infrastructure in ways that are truly groundbreaking. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go. Hi, I am Michael Santorelli. I'm the director of the Advanced Communications Law and Policy Institute at New York Law School. Chairman Brennan, Chairman Schimminger, distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for having me here today. I'd like to start, well, first by saying that I will summarize my written comments in the interest of time. And also attached to my comments are two more detailed filings that we submitted, one to the Public Service Commission in response to its telecom survey, and one to the Broadband Program Office in response to its request for information for the new New York program. And those filings go into a lot more detail than I will today. But first, I'd like to start.
Are you part of Connect New York?
I'm sorry?
Are you part of Connect New York, the advocacy?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right.
First, I'd like to start by commending the committees for convening this hearing. This has been a really great discussion, certainly one of the longer hearings I've been to, but certainly one of the better conversations and a great forum for bringing together such a diverse range of stakeholders. As I'll discuss in my abbreviated testimony, hopefully this is a conversation starter here in the legislature, because I think there are many opportunities for the legislature and the PSC and other state-level actors and local actors and all stakeholders to really move the ball forward on all of these issues that were discussed today. The written testimony is framed around the PSC's telecom survey, so that's essentially the backdrop for a lot of what is talked about in the comments. The data included is really great. It's a great one of the better, more comprehensive studies that has been done in the state in a while. It's one of the first attempts, I think, in a long time to bring together as much public information as possible to give a picture of where we are as a state. I think the data tells a very positive story about where the state has gone over the last 15, 20 years. Certainly challenges remain, but I think if we take a step back and look at the arc of how these sectors have emerged and evolved, I think there's been a very positive arc overall. And it's encouraging that the PSC is going to continue forward with its study through these technical conferences and continuing to study these issues that are raised in the survey and continuing this dialogue at the Commission. I'd like to jump ahead in my testimony, and I'll start summarizing around page 7. Talking about the opportunities, and I think the forum here is a great way to identify some opportunities for next steps. And there are several I'd like to talk about quickly. The first opportunity is around the IP transition, this notion of moving away from the copper network and towards more advanced services. I think there's significant data in the PSC survey, and we've heard today certainly that this transition has been ongoing for a long time, looking at the data trends away from the basic telephone, the number of telephone subscribers versus the number of voice over internet protocol subscribers and wireless subscribers. There's definitely a transition happening. And we've heard from service providers about the prospect of having to maintain two networks and the potential for siphoning away investment in the more advanced networks that consumers are increasingly want. But there's also many opportunities to do this transition in a more responsible way in order to protect consumers. And this is where policymakers, I think, should lead by example and seize the opportunity to work with the stakeholders and other relevant, the service providers and others to achieve the shared goals around a full embrace of all IP networks. For example, these kinds of partnerships and outreach in collaboration could lead to pilot programs or other sort of small-scale efforts to really study the issue and the dynamics on the ground. Other service providers have done these in other states and are really, in cooperation with the FCC, and are gathering some really interesting data, facts on the ground about what is the barriers and impediments to transitioning consumers off of copper and onto these more advanced networks. Something like that might be an opportunity. The legislature also can convene additional hearings, consider legislation around looking at laws to modernize the frameworks, to determine whether and how legacy laws that we've heard about today that have been on the books for decades, and some of the more lighter touch frameworks for some of the other services, how those two might marry up, and whether how to figure out a level of parity amongst all the platforms. The second opportunity I want to talk about quickly is bolstering broadband connectivity. We've heard a lot about the supply side today in terms of getting broadband to unserved areas. That's certainly a priority, I think, as witnessed through the governor's new New York program. But what we haven't heard a lot about today, outside of the discussion around in the merger context of the low-income program, is on the demand side and helping get more people online who choose not to, even though a connection is readily available. That's something that we've worked on a lot with sort of experts on the ground, trying to connect the unconnected. And the issue is more complicated than just price in a lot of instances. There are lots of individual barriers amongst those in certain communities that are, for whatever reason, are choosing not to go online. Cost coupled with notions of either not wanting it or not seeing it as a valuable investment. Those are certainly significant barriers that need to be addressed. Another opportunity is around consumer protection, as we've heard a lot about today, but also expanding the conversation to think about issues like privacy and cybersecurity. And finally, enhancing the coordination of state resources. There's been a lot of activity within the PSC in the governor's office, increasingly in the legislature, but there's been little effort to coordinate those activities across state government. And that, I think, is another role for the legislature to play in perhaps leading the way in trying to facilitate and rationalize all these programs, convening hearings and discussions to, again, figure out a way to coordinate those resources and target them in very specific ways at the very specific problems that are still evident in the state. So with that, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. All right.
All right.
Identify
Hi.
yourself again, please.
My name is Yurtis Lynn Blandford, and I am here to represent a citizen consumer point of view. I want to thank the chairman and members of the committee.
You have an unusual mark through the O in your name.
That is an It is a Norwegian letter. It's there's 3 extra vowels in Norwegian.
How interesting. Go ahead.
Is Norway near Bulgaria?
Not Bulgaria, but Vos.
Before you continue, let me just acknowledge that Assemblymember Simon, Joanne Simon from Brooklyn, has joined us, and appreciate your presence here. And I appreciate the two of you coming back as well. Thank you. Go ahead.
So thank you, Chairman, and all of the members of the committees on corporations, authorities, commissions, and economic development for providing me an opportunity to submit my testimony. This is my experience within the current broadband marketplace, specifically in Ulster County, though my primary residence is New York City. My parents recently put their hearts, souls, and savings into building a dream home and art studio in Ulster County, where we camped out of a tiny cabin for years. We were fortunate to be able to invest in sustainable building practices and energy systems using geothermal heat and solar roof panels. This process of putting down deeper roots into the land and surrounding community deepened my understanding of how important a role telecommunications plays for our safety, public engagement, and potential economic development. I agree with a growing consensus that telecommunications is the next utility. We are personally 10 miles outside of Ellenville, New York, and the local internet service providers are either HughesNet for satellite or Time Warner for cable. However, Time Warner does not currently serve our road, and my mother was quoted $30,000 for cutting a new line to the house, or just to the area. This is not what I would call sufficient marketplace competition. While I imagine a volume of customers is necessary to make it worthwhile to invest in laying cable, there has to be a better way than relying upon landowners to pay a telecommunications corporation $30,000 to get internet to an outlying road. So we chose the only option, which was HughesNet. And we chose the highest level plan that offers a total usage of 20 gigabytes for $129.99 plus fees and taxes for a total of $161.44 per month. This is not particularly affordable for an area where the median household income listed on Ellenville's Wikipedia page is $27,000. However, we chose the highest level plan due to our family's needs. This summer, due to heavy use, we went over the monthly gigabyte allowance. The billing is structured so that once you go over the monthly billing limit, you can buy 2 gigabyte tokens for $16. So we splurged in July. We kept purchasing additional tokens, and our bill was $529.44. Now, we know our high use is responsible for this exorbitant bill. However, it remains unfortunate that there is currently no other service provider option for broadband or internet in any way. One big reason we didn't conserve our web use was because my father was paraplegic, and his internet use increased in inverse proportion to the loss of his physical abilities. It became a tool that was his most used tool while still alive to stay in touch with his doctors, friends, and where he was politically active. Here is an example of health and safety, plus social and political involvement driven by internet connection. The internet is a powerful tool for people with disabilities, allowing people to travel, be present, and engaged in the world in ways that are not physically possible. My brother-in-law is a freelance writer, so he's often working while he visits, and his work requires being online for research and communication purposes. This is especially true that he does this online while upstate because the cell phone service in our area is unreliable, only available if one walks up the road a ways. Here's an example of how accessibly priced internet connectivity could encourage entrepreneurial innovation and economic development. There are not many brick-and-mortar job opportunities replacing manufacturing industries that left villages like Ellenville years ago. Reliable, low-cost internet and phone options could encourage new web-based businesses in all sorts of industries and help expand markets for existing small businesses. Now, while geothermal heating systems and solar panels do not require internet connection to operate, as consumers, we can get direct communication about how each system is working using online applications. We can check and change the internal home temperature and monitor how much solar energy we're collecting, all via the internet. Our solar system installer said recently that it's becoming industry standard for solar energy monitoring to be done via the internet. So this is just one family's experience, but I would venture to guess that others in rural areas encounter a similar lack of choice, and the cost of connectivity is likely prohibitively expensive for the average family in Ulster County. If we want to maintain the natural beauty of New York State, encourage tourism and growth of sustainable alternative energy industries, we must work in tandem to encourage more competition for reliable, affordable telecommunications service. Thanks again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to staying informed to help work toward getting telecommunications in every region of New York State accessible and up to speed.
Thank you. Very good. Any of my colleagues, would you like to ask some questions of the panel? Hello?
We're happy. I'm happy.
You're happy?
You happy? We're happy.
All right, well,
There's only one thing that I meant to comment on, and that is the limitations of the governor's broadband plan, which requires, as I understand it, and I haven't gotten into it in great detail, but it requires that there be a partnership with a provider, limits the providers, and it does not support municipal broadband, and that we see as a problem.
well, let me ask you a few questions, and I'll keep it to a few because it's 5:30, and I don't want my colleagues to throttle me shortly after the hearing is over. But anyway, you heard me ask about how the Public Service Commission order regarding Time Warner cable merger might affect Verizon. Is this substantial expansion of internet broadband speed in large parts of New York, where Verizon has, its, 4 to 15 megabit DSL, will the conditions involved with the order, as it gets implemented, end up with larger numbers of Verizon customers migrating over to Time Warner and further complicating Verizon's situation? Do you think that's or the opposite? Will this force Verizon to compete, to expand the Fios build-out?
Well, if you accept the basic premise that competition is going to improve service, then it should bring Verizon, it should force Verizon to provide better service. But I should point out that Common Cause opposed the merger, and we were concerned with the conditions because, frankly, we feel the conditions are basic service. And to add these kind of conditions to a merger, to us, is a regulatory failure, that the companies should be providing this kind of service as basic service, not as a special inducement, a special condition to allow them to merge. So it's disappointing. If competition is going to work, then it should work in this instance to bring Verizon's service up. But again, what we see over and over and over again is that the industry wishes to remain as a monopoly or a duopoly. And that's why we think regulation is needed.
Any comments, Jerry?
From personal experience, we were once a Verizon landline customer and left at one point, and no one ever tried to win us back. Never got any deals saying, hey, come on back. I think what's going on is a market division. We see Verizon, from its own statements, saying we're focusing on wireless, and we're focusing on Fios where we want to. And the other areas, if you leave us, fine. Go to Time Warner and be gone. And jettisoning the copper landline services, or trying to sell them, or trying to get rid of the lines in one way or another. And I think that poses real question, because we have a utility service, the copper landline wireline service. We have a desire, under PSC policy at least, to see competition. And I think instead, as I said, we're seeing more of a market division, which happens in an oligarchical or duopolistic type environment.
I just have two things. First, President Assen, AARP. I know that AARP runs these wonderful programs on safe driving to improve the driving and maintain the driving skills of older folks like me who are over 50 years old. The digital divide, I think many older people, or a disproportionate number of older people, are on the wrong side of that divide and have not developed the, the digital literacy to access successfully the internet. Might you consider, or your organization consider, I should say, some kind of digital literacy initiative?
Well, we have a program called Tech, which provides training and instruction to do the kinds of things that you're describing. But I would also add, in my pre-retirement state, as a service provider to older New Yorkers in New York City, the uptake in senior centers, computer learning centers, was a tremendous asset. And we found many seniors who were on the wrong side of that divide, as you've described, migrating to the other side and really being very happy. And I would think the old notion that seniors and computers don't mix is really old thinking. I think given the opportunity and the motivation, if nothing else, to look at the grandkids' pictures on a tablet or something, if you can't go to the wedding, these are really powerful motivators. But thank you for the question.
Yeah. And Susan Lerner, posed a quandary when there were no questions being asked. Thank you, Susan. The quandary was, I think your quandary was, isn't it too bad that you need a private sector partner in order to apply for some of the $500 million in
Correct.
New York broadband? I wanted to ask you why you say that, because I look at what I got from the governor's office. Phase 1 eligibility includes, and I think that all 5 of these are in the disjunctive, Phase 1 eligibility incorporated organizations, A, B, Native American, C, a unit of local government or a group, multiple group of local governments. Doesn't have to be, by my reading of this, in partnership with a private sector provider. I could be wrong.
And I could be wrong because I haven't
what they may be
gone through it in
envisioning
detail.
here is just as we have in the energy field, where you've got these munis that own municipalities that own their own systems. That may be what's being envisioned here. I don't know.
That's what we would hope. But I understand, for instance, the city of Syracuse, which has been exploring municipal broadband, would not be eligible to apply here, I guess because
They're Syracuse.
Yeah. Because of Time Warner provides service to some portions of the city, but hasn't expanded to all portions of the city, even though the broadband map shows that Syracuse is fully covered. In actuality, on the ground, there was testimony at the PSC that the way in which industry chooses to report its coverage is actually not the way in which individuals experience the coverage.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last question. All right.
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. You go first.
I'll let the chairman wrap up, but we talked about the maybe the older generation that may be on the wrong side of the digital divide, and we have this hang on to the copper network and two different regulatory structures going on, as was mentioned. I guess I want to get the sense of, how many folks think that, the cell phone is probably more reliable at this point than the copper line. And I know there's a lot of implications to that.
You and
Let
then
me just
I'll
answer.
talk
But,
directly to that.
you could be in the Adirondacks and have a tree take your copper out. I mean, you can have your cell service within a couple of minutes.
It's an interesting question that you raise. I live in Manhattan, and we recently upgraded to Fios. And my wife, who is, the ultimate in planning for disasters, decided as part of that upgrade that we should keep a landline, a copper-based landline, just in case. So, we've got a copper-based landline, which we're paying, whatever it is, along with, all this whiz-bang, wonderful new technology. And I think it's just it's a perception.
I would have to disagree. We spent substantial time on Fire Island in the summer of 2014 because Fire Island the west part of Fire Island lost its telephone service, and Verizon chose initially not to rewire. And they went out and offered people wireless hookups. A product they had called VoiceLink, which basically plugs into the wall and it takes the wireless signal and routes it through your phones. People were up in arms. People were infuriated about it because it's actually not equivalent. The thing about the copper service that no one has really grappled with in the transition, and I very much appreciate the comments about how we need to be doing a better job in the transition, is I'm old enough to have lived through the blackout of 1977 in New York City, and at that time I had a 3-week-old child, and the only thing that worked was the copper phone. And that was certainly the experience which people on Fire Island had as well. There are certain medical devices which are regulated through the copper wires. I learned from individuals on Fire Island that there are pacemakers that weekly are adjusted through the copper wires, and there's no equivalent
They
so
could be
far that's been
adjusted through other
developed.
telecom
Apparently not. We had many people testifying, really frightened, women standing next to their husbands who had pacemakers, whose doctors had told them that there were no equivalences. So the
Well, was that
technology
because
hasn't caught up yet, but it needs to. The transition, they haven't become directly equivalent yet. So our experience is some of our members feel very strongly that they've been forced off copper before they want to be forced off copper. And out on Fire Island, there are real questions regarding the way in which the FiOS system, which ultimately did replace copper, is going to function in the emergency situation. But certainly the wireless was not acceptable to the people out there. They petitioned the PSC, and the PSC forced Verizon to go in and rewire.
Okay, I just, from experience, I've found, even in my own family, that even though, say my grandmother should be on the wrong side of the digital divide, we get her on her cell phone more often than the house phone because
She can carry it with her.
she can carry it with her. And so we also don't have to have other types of services in the event of a fall or an accident because the cell phone is there. And frankly, I haven't had a landline in over a decade because it's extremely cost prohibitive.
But sometimes the cell phone is not a substitute for metal.
Oh, yes, we have charging issues we have to deal with and buy new, there are those things, but.
Right, and when somebody
but we
falls
also
and
have a lot of
hits
severe-
their head, they're not going to be using their cell phone. So MedAlert is another system which hasn't transitioned to a wireless form yet. So they're not directly equivalent, and there are certain services, particularly for the disabled and the elderly, which have been developed through the copper system that have not yet transitioned. And it's interesting to me the technology hasn't caught up because they are such essential services for livelihood and for the health of our older and disabled communities.
Thank you.
So thank you.
All right, this is the last one.
Softball.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think it's going to be a softball. So you may have heard me ask the Public Service Commission why they couldn't simply have ordered Time Warner Cable without the merger to do the investments necessary to bring the broadband speeds up to 100 megabits, 300 megabits, et cetera. And by the same token, or as an extension of that same idea, why the Public Service Commission or the state legislature couldn't say that Verizon had to do 100% fiber throughout the state of New York so that you would end up with at least two triple play type providers. So the Public Service Commission said, well, we're looking at it, but it has been suggested to us that we could not do that, and that the Public Service Commission could not do that because the FCC, because it is indicated that they have to forbear from price regulation, therefore that would involve rate setting, and therefore they couldn't do it.
I'll try to tackle that. I think that, first of all, the Public Service Commission has, on occasion, exercises breathtaking leaps of jurisdiction. And I think this is one that they could. In some areas of telecom regulation, the states have been left to deal with the terms and conditions of service. And it's a recognition, for example, that the FCC is ill-equipped to handle customer complaints. The FCC system has a $150 complaint filing fee. They have an informal mediation that doesn't decide disputes. And they can't do it nationwide. And so there is a role for the states in looking at service quality, terms and conditions of service. Is the speed a term and condition of service? Yeah. The other, if you look at it the other way, from the ground up, as I mentioned before, because this service is being provided over a telephone line. FiOS is a telephone line. It provides telephone service. They are putting it into buildings using their powers as a telephone corporation. The statute says that the commission, I think, has jurisdiction over services provided in connection with the telephone line. So it's not too big a leap if the agency wanted to take it to interpret that to say, yeah, this is in connection with a phone line. You're providing phone service just like VoIP over the cable and just like FiOS on the fiber optic line. So you could also go on the statute. I think also if the commission didn't do it, and someone might still try to make a common law claim in court that even if there is no statute, as Cardozo said, they're using the public streets, they're providing a service over a wire, they're providing an enhanced service over that wire, and they can't provide it just to some and not make it available to everyone. So one could chart out a duty to serve, and I think that is one of the reasons why we hear the phone companies sort of ambiguously saying, let's get rid of that old law, that old-fashioned law, because they don't want a duty to serve. They want to pick and choose their customers and harvest the customers who are dependent upon them and can't go elsewhere.
Thank you. All right. Appreciate your testimony. Thank you for your patience and being here all day long.
And we appreciate
Thank all
your
of you
patience.
who are still here, and my colleagues
We wanted
for
to hear from
a good
the
hearing.
citizen.
All right.
Burr?